So the first of our speakers we're going to hear from, who, as I say, is one of the women who features prominently in the book for her amazing work, is Sabrinna Valisce. You did campaign at one stage as a sex workers' rights activist. In fact, you campaigned for blanket decriminalisation during your time in prostitution, and I think you worked in Australia, but also in New Zealand, am I right? Certainly you were campaigning in New Zealand, where, of course, they have effectively decriminalised. Welcome to you, and thank you for sharing with us your experience.
Okay, you can hear me? Hi. Okay, so I'll start with saying I'm an exited woman of the New Zealand model of full decriminalisation, and I entered prostitution in New Zealand, having spent half my life in Australia and half my life in New Zealand. Oops, notes going. Now, note I didn't say sex worker, and that's because I'm the real deal. I'm a person who actually did the sucking and fucking in the sex trade. I'm not one of these pretenders who is using the words sex work or sex worker to cover the fact that I've never spent a day in my life in the actual trade. This is what the opposition does. And it's an obfuscation tactic. So I worked in New Zealand under Prohibition. We changed the law to full decriminalisation. I worked under full decriminalisation in New Zealand, and I worked under partial decriminalisation in New South Wales and partial legalisation in Queensland. So it's a few different models, a few different places, all on the other side of the world. And I did stripping prostitution and filmed prostitution, which is sort of the bottom, low end of porn. So I believe anyone who's never done the actual sucking and fucking has absolutely no right whatsoever to call themselves a sex worker, because it undermines voices such as mine. And so when someone says, I'm a sex worker, I challenge you guys to ask them, what exactly does that mean? Now, talking about obfuscation of language, Julie mentioned about McDonald's, and we had a debate, and that was brought up, this whole McDonald's thing of somebody getting cuts and burns at work, and, oh no, there's risks in every job, and, you know, it's the same. And so I challenged this guy, and I said to him, if you had to do one more day in McDonald's, and the only other way that you could not do it, the only out you've got is if you bend over and took it up the ass, what would you do? Now, he knew immediately the difference between one job and this other so-called job. And you find most people do when it's applied to their own body. They only pretend they don't understand when it's applied to somebody they don't know and think is beneath them. So, under Prohibition, our biggest fear was the police. You know, we were automatically criminals, and so we were subject to police brutality. And this is something that, you know, the pro-lobby will talk about a lot. And by the pro-lobby, I'm talking about people who are pro-trade, and they're going for full decriminalisation. And it's one area that I think we all agree with them on, is we don't want the women criminalised. We don't want women in prostitution and men and trans and non-binary people in prostitution to fear the police. But one of the things that they don't seem to realise is we exchanged problems. We went from fearing the police to fearing the pimps. And by pimps, I mean brothel owners, escort agency owners. We're not talking about the racist stereotype you see in the movies of the black guy in a purple suit with gold chains. They look like everybody else. Most of the time, they're in jeans and a t-shirt, or they might be in a suit, you know, with their briefcase, looking exactly like you and your mates. So I call these guys biz pimps. And in the two countries that I have the right to live and work in, that's Australia and New Zealand, these fine, upstanding businessmen who sell women and girls have been legitimised, and they're now the biggest problem. So I'm going to give you a window into the lounge room now. Some people have seen me speak before know that I don't talk about the horror stories, I talk about the everyday reality. And the reason for that is because I think if you talk about the everyday reality, most people don't actually want to be there. So this is the lounge room, not the bedroom. So you walk into the lounge, what you see is women in lingerie, 6-inch heels, and they're made to dress like that. This is not a choice. You don't get to wear clothing. You don't say, oh, I'm going to dress like a, you know, in this outfit or that outfit. It's the uniform of the place that the business pimp has decided everybody must wear. So the uniform, lingerie, 6-inch heels. The heating is set for the men who come in. And the men who come in are, wearing normal clothes. They're fully clothed. So women are standing up to keep warm, walking around because it's too cold in there. But then your feet get sore, so you have to sit down and rest your feet. So you're going between being too cold and having sore feet for 12 to 17-hour shifts. And I've never worked in a brothel in New Zealand that had a shift less than 12 hours. This is legal. The men who walk in, they come in ones, twos, groups. But there's something that's changed. They used to want to come in the back door and not be seen by anybody in the public. It was embarrassing to them. Now it's so normalised that they come in groups. And I've even seen on Facebook, go into the brothel tonight, who wants to come? And this is my mates. This is not, some people out there. So I'm going to tell you about something that actually happened. A man walks into the lounge and he says, "Which one of you cunts wants to suck my dick?" And he bellowed this. He didn't say it quietly like I just did. Nobody batted an eyelid because this is so normal. The receptionist didn't even bother looking up. That's the way men talk to you in those places. But it gets worse because they talk about you in front of you as though you're not a human being because they come in groups. So they say, "Oh, well, what do you think of green dress over there? Oh, she's got no tits on her. Oh, how about, the one next to her? Oh, she's got a good rack, but does the old girl get thrown in for free when you book her daughter?" This is the way they talk about us in front of us. Now, I don't think anyone under any circumstance deserves to be subjected to that. And if you were at your workplace and somebody talked about you like that, you would have options to deal with it. We didn't because it was normal and decriminalised. Or in other words, legalised. So the biz pimps, brothel owners, escort agency owners, rolled out something we'd never seen before, and it's called an all-inclusive. Now, an all-inclusive means that a man pays a set amount of money to the receptionist, and then he chooses some girl from the lounge room, and there's nightclub level music going on, so 12 to 17 hours of nightclub volume music, great for the headaches. But the all-inclusive to the punter is I can do whatever the hell I want for an hour. Now, the reception will say, "No, it's just the basics." But does the punter know what the basics are? Unless he's going there regularly, they don't. So when you get into one of those rooms, the first thing you're doing is fighting with the punter as to what you will and won't do, because he feels entitled to whatever the hell he wants. Once upon a time, it was just once. Now they go 3, 4 times because I've booked for this amount of time. I've paid for this. The biz pimps take half, but they actually take a bit more than that. They take half of each job, but they charge you a shift fee. So the second you've walked through the door, you are in debt. Every single time. They also charge for, fees and fines. The fines are things like appearance infraction fees, $2 per minute if you come out of the room late or if you turn up to the shift late. You get fined for driver's fees. If the drivers had to wait around for you, that's considered lateness, and also just for petrol. So they look for ways to take as much of the money as they can. Advertising fees without an actual receipt telling you how much the advertising actually cost. And if you bother to look it up in the papers, well, it used to be the papers, now it's online, you'll see that it's just actually advertising the brothel, and then they just shove your working name at the end of it. So it's not even your ad. So, when I started, the beginning of my exiting was when I saw a woman come back from an outcall. And an outcall is like pizza delivery. This is where a man rings up, he orders off a menu, and a woman gets sent to him. That's why we have driver's fees, yeah? But a woman came back from one of these. driver dropped her off on the street, as is usual. He didn't bother going up to the door, didn't check the premises, because they don't do that. They're drivers, not security. She'd knocked on the door and, had to check out the place by herself without any backup whatsoever, and was there for an hour with no backup, no support, no way of contacting anybody. Got picked up, brought back to the brothel, and she had a breakdown. The receptionist said, "Pull your shit together and get out in the lounge." That's not the first time I'd seen things like that, but it was one of the worst that I'd seen, because this woman was having an actual breakdown. It wasn't just a bad day. Something had happened and she was panicking. That moment, I actually picked up my stuff. I didn't even bother getting dressed. I walked out of the place in lingerie, because I was just like, there is no way in hell I am working here. So that was the beginning of my exiting, not the absolute exit. I entered, exited, spent a lot of years doing that. So, people think, but you can go to the police now. Really? Would you go to the police knowing there's no proof you ever worked there? There could be video footage of your gang rape, because they do that. They send you out to their mates and they film it. That could be sent to your family, your friends. You could be outed. Not only that, but the media could get hold of your real name, splash that across the internet, and so when you try to get a job outside of the sex trade, potential employer looks up your name, Googles it, up comes the word whore. I don't know about you, but that's not something I was going to do. It's not something anybody I knew in the trade did. So New Zealand and Australia are in a damn mess. And I've flown to the other side of the world, here. I've outed myself publicly, and I've taken a hell of a lot of shit for doing so, by the way. And I've done it for the reason of saying, don't make our mistakes. Do it better. Don't copy us. It's not working. And it's being pushed down, covered up, and pretended like everything's okay. It's not. Be leaders. Do something different. Do something better. And the reason that I got involved in abolition is because I don't think anybody deserves to be trapped between a rock and a hard place and saying, oh yeah, this is empowering me because, well, the other option is that I'm going to be starving and homeless. Not being starving, not being homeless is not empowering. It's just a little bit better, but still not good enough. We have roll-on effects into society that a lot of people don't know about. And I'll give you an example of something that's happening in legalised Victoria and decriminalised New South Wales and legalised Queensland. There's a restaurant called Tits and Schnitz, a bit like Hooters. So Schnitz stands for schnitzel, and that's what they serve. They only serve one type of food. But the advertising has a naked woman bending over and a man's face in her genitals. That's the advertising, and I've seen it on the side of school buses, larger than life size, and we have tried to get it taken down. We've actually gone to the advertising authority, and they said, we can't actually take it down because it's legal. That's one of the roll-on effects in Australia. Now, let me tell you about the first time I saw a roll-on effect in New Zealand. This was at the World Buskers Festival 2005, 2 years after full decriminalisation has passed. Went into a nightclub, ordinary nightclub. What I saw was huge screens with porn playing, and this was gonzo porn, by the way, so we're talking about violence against women, and it's not as bad back then as it is now, but it was still quite violent acts, normalised in a nightclub for anybody who was of age to be able to see it, but the front, all clear windows, so if kids are walking past and they happen to go like that, they would have seen it. That's become fairly normal. In fact, it's become a little bit passé in some ways, because you can now get live sex shows in nightclubs. You can get toy shows in nightclubs, and it's not always advertised. I've walked in, I've seen a punter or a punter of the nightclub actually eating a banana out of a woman on the stage in the nightclub. Not an advertised event. So it's not just about inside the trade, it's the roll-on effects into society that normalises it to a point that you don't have control over what you see or what your kids see, what they're exposed to anymore. And I think we have the right to decide, I want to see this, I don't want to see that. So hopefully I've clarified a few things about full decriminalisation, partial legalisation and partial decriminalisation and why it hasn't worked for you. Thanks.